Wow. Thanks to Winston. Man.
Yeah.
What I needed to hear. I told him I was going to say this. I didn't tell him what it was, but I have one giant criticism of what he said. It's a good lesson. It really is an amazing lesson. Here's my criticism. I can hear it and believe it. I even said an amen every once in a while. When I'm sitting in this peaceful building with people who love each other and who are able to kind of look past all the terrible things in the world, I need Winston to come and preach that lesson to me right after I listen to an NPR story or watch a Fox News broadcast on YouTube. Y'all know what I mean? I need him right there as much as I listen to those. Now, I wonder if there's a more efficient solution to that than having Winston come every time I watch a newscast. Yeah, there probably is. Y'all can work on that. I'm going to talk about Isaiah and the chapters. I guess, sorry, I have to say this. This is going to be really hard. Does this come out?
We're gonna. Yeah, you can hold it.
Okay. Maybe I can hold it again. So Caleb gave me the four most abstract, apocalyptic, symbolic chapters in the Bible. Right? In fact, some people call it Isaiah's apocalypse, right? That's 24 to 27. But he also gave me the most literal, historical section of all, and that's the part about Hezekiah, where they had the interaction with Rabshakeh outside the city. So we're going to go from the sublime to the, specific, the detail. But I think the message is more or less the same in both as we look at it. I do want to provide a kind of a, is the city gone? Yeah, I probably should have just repeated on here. I want to provide an overall structure of Isaiah and how my sections fit in. We have already looked at 1 through 12 roughly, omitting some things. We just looked at 13 through 27, omitting a few things. But I'll just mention that if you look in 13 through 27, what you get is a vision of God's judgment on a bunch of different nations. And if you go back and look at 13 through 23, which I won't do, you'll find a whole bunch of nations. The burden of, and then just a whole list. And I'm going to show you that list in just a minute, just so we don't overlook that. But I think it fits in with understanding chapters 24 through 27. But in the yellow section that I'm going to cover, there is this vision, overall vision of worldwide, and I mean worldwide. It might even, cosmic might be the right term to use for that. Cosmic disaster. And then there's a song about God's works. And then there's a song of salvation. And then there's a picture of God's restored vineyard, borrowing from some of the images from chapters 1 through 7 or so. So there's a feast. Well, there was a feast earlier, one of the good ones. This is a good one, right? There was a city that was ruined by sin. This is a good city that God builds and restores. So that's in that picture. So that's an outline kind of my section. In addition, though, the specific historical sections is here. That's Rabshakeh's challenge and the events that follow, and a little bit more about King Hezekiah. And then I also get the chance to look at a verse right at the end of the book, which is in chapter 66, which is a 2-verse summary, really, of God, his fellowship with men, and what he expects of us. And I want to conclude with that. Now, I expect to run out of time. And my method, poor, terrible method, is I run out of time right when people are losing their attention, and I try to make all the applications in the remaining 30 seconds. I'm going to outsmart myself today. This is my last chart. Okay, I'm serious about this. I will not have time to cover this adequately. So maybe I'll tell you what the applications are. What am I trying to say in the whole thing? And as we go through, you can pick up the details that might lead us to these kind of conclusions. You okay with that?
Right, yeah.
I'll feel better at least when we run out of time. Here's what I want us to be able to do after we finish. I want to be able to see beyond the domination, which Winston, sorry, stop talking so favorably. I get to begin. But see beyond the domination of terror of earthly powers. Do you feel that sometimes?
Yeah.
Like watching CNN, I don't know, but whenever. And I want to see past that to God's power as He has demonstrated in the past and in future events.
Right.
I need to keep that in my head all the time. I want us to see that in these verses as well.
Right.
I want, me personally, I want to be able to praise God for these acts of judgment. This is the hard part. Whatever they are, good or bad, if I understand them or I don't, if it hurts me personally or it doesn't, if I perceive some sense of injustice or not. Does that ever happen? Has that ever happened in the Bible? You think of another prophet who said to God, wait, you're not going to do some knuckleheaded thing like bring an evil power, more evil than us, against us, would you? You wouldn't do that, would you? God might do things that would, like, we wouldn't understand it even if He told us. That's what He said. Yes. Okay. Number 3. I want to prepare for that judgment, which won't be easy. Might be difficult. I want to prepare for that judgment and the turmoil, both societal and private, in my own life, by looking at that restored world. I want to hold that in always in my view. And whatever happens, I say, okay, well, that's not the end of the story. And we'll get there one day. I want to revere God, as we'll see in chapter 66, as high and holy,
Amen.
Unreachable, and yet as one who dwells with the other end of the spectrum, if you think about it, the humble and the obedient, who are not striving for their own way or their own rights, but those who submit themselves to God. And then maybe on a more personal level, I'm thinking of Mark's talk yesterday, for the men, I want to be able to deal with personal crises by turning to God in everything. First step. Okay. We could be done, I guess, but if you're interested in Isaiah, we'll say a little bit more, and talk about that. Before we start into 24 and read it, the first part of chapter 24, I would just encourage you to look back at the previous chapters. I think the previous chapter, 23, ends with the burden of Tyre, but there are a lot of other nations that have led up to that. There is a very clear break. Very specific prophecies about Tyre end in 23. And I'll notice the language in 24 as if we are shifting the scene. If we had some kind of screenplay at work, there might be like fade to black, and then suddenly there would be this, large span of new scene. Can you picture that? So our brains are reset to read this text, maybe in a different way, a much more global way. And here's the way it reads. I'm reading from the LSB, which uses the word Yahweh as the personal name of God. Jehovah, if you're in the Old King James or American Standard. Behold, Yahweh empties the earth to destruction, eviscerates it, distorts its surfaces, scatters its inhabitants. And the people will be like priests, the male slave like the master, the female like the mistress, the buyer like the seller, the lender like the borrower, the creditor like the debtor. That little phrase, all that sentence surprises me. What's that doing in there? And I'll ask this question with those words in your mind. Is this a class warfare issue? The priests are abusing the layman, right? The creditors are abusing the debtors. Is that what's going on? Is it some kind of societal abuse? I see a lot of heads going this way. Who's equal here in this judgment of God? If you owe a lot of money or you got a lot of debtors that owe you money, either way. You understand what I mean?
Right.
What I'm seeing here is not some kind of social upheaval. There's a different dimension to this problem. It's not wealth or class or anything like that. It's not even religious leaders versus non-religious leaders.
Right.
It's sin. You'll see that as we go on in the text. You see, it's outside the dimension of what we kind of tend to orient ourselves around with regard to, injustice and those kind of things. Sorry for that interjection, but that's the way I can understand that sentence that's stuck in there. No, verse 3. The earth will be completely emptied to destruction, completely plundered, for Yahweh has spoken his word. The earth mourns and withers, the world languishes and withers, the exalted of the people languish, the earth is polluted by its inhabitants, for they have trespassed laws. You see that? See what the problem is? Violated statutes, broke the everlasting covenant. Therefore, For this reason, therefore, a curse devours the earth, and those who inhabit it are held guilty. Therefore, the inhabitants of the earth are burned, and few men remain. Wow, there's an optimistic picture. Can you get the feeling of despair and destruction? And the words, I wish I knew Hebrew and could hear it in Hebrew, because I have an idea that twisted, distorted, or just some English scholars attempt to make that kind of emotional impact on it. I think it may have been even more than that. So when I look back at the chapters before, I think about Babylon. And I'm not going to read through each of them, but if you go look at those texts, you'll see what Isaiah is, or God is complaining about in these nations, right? Oppression, systematic corruption, the antagonism. We'll see that in the Rev Shack interviews later. Philistia is constant and always fighting with Israel. Moab is the example of human pride. In fact, it will come back in this text, but read chapter 16. The alliance with apostasy, that's Syria and Ephraim allying together. We'll see that. We actually read about that. Winston helped us see that. Ethiopia is power, I think numerical power perhaps, based on other incidents, right? And their ability to intimidate. Egypt, who seem to be taking counsel from the spirit world and other kinds of idolatrous things. Jerusalem is on the list. Yeah. Among other things, a mere profession of faith.
Yeah.
With disobedience driven behind it. And Tyre is the last one. The worldly glory of Tyre. Phoenician, worldwide trading city, who probably counted on that prosperity and I almost said affordability, but I didn't say that. But you know what I mean, political measurements of some kind of economic stability. Y'all get that?
I got it.
So that's what the characters of the nations are. So, being a math teacher, I thought, well, and Caleb warned us about using terms that people don't understand yesterday. So I'm going to turn this into mathematical language, and maybe that will help everybody understand. Here are all these nations. What's happening in 24 through 27, I think, is this is a very simple form of the math right here. And that is, I think you're just adding it all up. It all fits together. Not only what they do, but what God does in response to that.
Right.
All right, so Caleb got that. I can tell I got it. Okay, so let's get a little bit more advanced math to work on this. Let's imagine a number line from zero, or from time zero to the judgment day. All right, mouse along. I'm sorry. So sum it up and you get that. So here's my timeline, and it starts at the beginning of creation, right? And maybe we're here at time now, sometime after the beginning of time. And then what happens is that in the positive side here, that's when God rewards people for doing good things. And on the negative side is when he rewards people. And by people, I mean nations, leaders, but also individuals. Is your life kind of like you may have some of both of those? So, for example, here's a graph. I don't know what nation this is, but can you think of nations in the Bible that were punished, and then they repented, and then they were punished? Right? And it's even more significant if they're a powerful nation, world-famous nation, right? The fact that they're punished. The fact that I'm punished probably doesn't matter too much to the rest of the world, but a big nation or a big leader, that's a big deal.
Right.
So I can draw a curve like that. Y'all understand that curve? Mm-hmm. This is working great, I can tell already. But there are other nations, right? A purple nation. In fact, some of these nations will kind of be blessed by our view as the other nations are conquered, right? Does that ever happen? Yeah. One nation conquers another. Winston kind of ran us through some of that illustration, right? So I got all these nations, and you can put kings, and you can put yourself on this graph if you want to.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I have a bunch of entities from 1 to n. It's a large number, but maybe finite. I don't know. So I'm thinking that this chapter could be expressed with this equation. All right? So,
I got it.
If I could sum up from 1 to n, all together, right? Every one of these graphs, area under the curve, absolute value, because everything God does, punishment or blessing, is all on the positive side. And so here's the judgment of God, and here's the kind of power of that nation. Multiply that function, integrate from time 0 to time t, pile it all up in a big pile. That's chapter 24 through 27. You see that? Judgment, reward, over all the time, every kind of image that you could be used. I think that's the way that it's described. By the way, I'm sure everyone wants a copy of this chart. My email is Marty Broadwell at Gmail. And I'll send it to you this afternoon. Okay. Anyway, so I hope that was helpful.
Translate.
Here's another way to organize 24 to 27. That is, there are these visions or these descriptions of what God's going to do. And then I didn't notice this at first, but it's a little like this, it's not the same. It's a little like in the Psalms, you're reading along, and it says, God is this and God. And then it also says, oh Yahweh, do this for me. You see there's a difference there. Yeah. One's a third person description, right. The other is a second person address. And it seems like the writers in the Old Testament, especially in poetry, they don't mind switching back and forth. I mean, right away. And so it's like that, although what happens, I think, in these chapters, and I'll put these references up, I won't say this again, but as we go through the text, summarizing it, if you see a light blue shading, it means I think it's a song of praise, above all things. And they show up in the most dire, unpleasant circumstances. The first one's interesting, like somewhere there's this noise from all over the earth of people singing a praise to God. In the middle of this judgment, how can that be? Can you get a feeling for how that would, in a poetry before they had movies to watch and stuff like that? This is a little bit of a soundtrack, perhaps, behind the scenes saying, yeah, oh boy, I hear a chorus saying, this is a good thing. Okay. All right, so here's what we're going to do, try to go through the text. I want you to see some of the language. And but remember our applications as we go, so I hope you can pick those up. But I'm going to summarize these verses, a little chunk at a time, but I'm going to show you some quotes, it'll be in blue, that will illustrate the language of Isaiah when he is making these points, right? We just read the beginning of that section. Dark, catastrophic, frightening, cataclysmic. I can't even think of good words for enough good words, but anyway, starting in verse 7 through 11, is all joy and pleasure ceases. No kidding, right? All the city of chaos. This is a quotation now from Isaiah. And the word for chaos there is tohu, which is from the very first or second verse of the Bible, right? Mm-hmm. You know that word. And it's basically the earth was like chaos and empty. Same word. The city of empty, or not emptiness, but of chaos, of disorder. It's without. Okay, so all gladness turns to gloom. The joy of the earth is taken away into exile, verse 11. You can have your Bible open. You can look at the verses I'm skipping over, but I hope these are characteristic. Chapter 24, verse 12. The city and its protections are struck down. Desolation remains in the city, and the gate is struck down. Think about what cities are in the idea. They're a place of prosperity, a place of protection, and they're a place of fellowship where people are together. And then, of course, in God's city with Him, but also with each other in fellowship. So think about, and what's the source of the protection? The walls and the gates, well, blown away. There's no protection, no security. And desolation, no prosperity. Here's a song. Now, I don't know, from the ends of the earth, we hear songs. What? Glory to the righteous one. I would not have put that there. Y'all see my point, don't you? I hope. This I think, it's probably not quite the same, but Shakespeare's chorus is something, or actually I'm thinking of Song of Solomon, really, when the chorus comes in and has something to say. Back to 16 now, part B, an inescapable destruction. Notice a little bit of flood imagery. I say, I waste away. Woe is me. The treacherous deal treacherously. He who flees the sound of panic will fall into the pit. He who climbs out of the pit will be caught in a snare, a hunter's snare, almost as if these are victims about to be slain as they prey. In that day, Yahweh will punish the hosts of heights on high. I think the reference there, especially in the Hebrew, is the hosts of heaven. It doesn't really quite say that, but I believe it's something like the principalities and powers of Ephesians, right? The ones that we wrestle with. We don't see them, but in some ways they are kind of a source and part of the battle going on. That's my understanding of those texts. And because he says, and what else? The hosts of high, but also the kings of the earth. So anybody that's kind of influencing me in some way is going to be taken down. For Yahweh of hosts will reign on Mount Zion and in Jerusalem. And of course, mountain and Jerusalem are symbols really of this restored city. We're going to get there. Mountain's big. That term, whenever you see it, you're seeing God's restored power, protection, prosperity, and fellowship. Chapter 25. 1 through 5, I think, is thanks to God for his destruction of the ruthless and protection of the needy. And guess what? It's a blues, right? It's a song of thanksgiving to God. I'll exalt you. I'll give thanks to your name, verse 1. For you have made a city into a heap. What's the reason he's giving thanks? Yes, there's a restored city. He's also given thanks for a ruin of a city that's been made. What? You have been a strong defense for the poor, verse 4. Verse 6, there's a banquet on this protected mountain. And I think we should compare that. If you go back to chapter 5, there's a banquet going on there, but it's a human, pleasure-centric banquet. And here's what Isaiah says. And their banquets are accompanied by lyre, by harp, by tambourine, flute, and wine, right? But they don't look upon the deeds of Yahweh, nor do they see the work of his hands. An empty, godless banquet. And yet, what does Yahweh of hosts provide on his mountain? Yahweh of hosts will prepare a lavish banquet for those people on this mountain. He'll swallow up the covering which is over all the peoples. I'm going to stop there for a minute. A lot of commentaries will link that directly to the veil Moses put over his face, but now we see the veil is removed and there's a clarity in the new covenant. I think it might relate to Leviticus 26, and that is, God said, if you don't obey me and you're an agrarian society, I'm going to put an iron ceiling on the sky. What's the idea of that? No rain. It's going to be terrible, right? God removes that in this text. I don't know for sure what that reference is, but there are a couple of ideas there. And he will swallow up death for all time and wipe tears away from all faces in that day. This is our God. You say this. This is our God in whom we have hoped that he would save us. I think I'm going to stop there. Well, maybe I should go ahead and animate one more thing. Moab will be trodden down. That's the only specific reference to a nation in this entire set. And I think it's just symbolic for pride. Go back and read the chapter about Moab, which I think is 16. And it's just pride. That's their primary failing. Moab will be trodden down in his place. I had to put this in there because the imagery is so graphic. Trodden down in the water of a manure pile. Right? So he's not just trodden down on the dry dust. No, it's like being in the wet part of a manure pile, I guess is the idea. And worse than that, the knucklehead is trying to swim out of it. It looks like he says he spreads out his hands in the middle of it like a swimmer. But Yahweh will lay low his lofty pride and the trickery of his hands. Now here's a question I wanted to ask. And I might need to go back to that integral equation that we saw a minute ago for you to answer that. So the interpreters look at these texts, and so do we. And I ask you, could this be specifically about the alliance between Syria and Ephraim, or Israel, under Pekah and what was the other guy? Who was the Israelite guy? I forgot. Yeah, well, he addressed Ahaz, but I forget. Anyway, could it be about that? Could it be about a serious threat that comes along after Syria and eventually takes the nation down? Could it be about Babylon coming in and taking them into captivity? Could it be about the restoration of Israel after the captivity and their purification? Could it be about the coming of Jesus in the first century with power, fulfilling the prophecies of God, establishing his city, his fellowship. Could it be about that? Could it be about the end of time? Right? When all of the world is destroyed and God's people are gathered together in the New Jerusalem. What's the answer to every one of those questions?
Yes.
Yes. And I don't think it's right to try to pick one verse and say, well, that's about Assyria. No, that's about the captivity. Remember, we integrated from 0 to T sub F, which means it's all of time. It's all those nations. It's all those acts of God throughout all of time. See it in that way. Now, so if I read something like he swallowed up death, are you surprised with that? What might that be?
Christ.
The end of time, right? I mean, first of all, yes, good point. It could be Jesus who conquered death in his own life, right? Could be that. Or, probably end of time, right? He'll wipe away all tears. We're going to see that. That's language out of the New Testament. You know that. And I know those New Testament writers knew they were quoting Isaiah passages. And that's kind of my explanation for why you say, oh, that's got to be the end of time. Okay, yeah, that too, right? As well as all the others. Now, that's just the way I interpret this. You may have a different opinion, but to me that makes the most sense. In that these chapters exist independent of specific events in time and describe the way God is going to manage his world. And maybe our personal lives as well. And now as we move to chapter 26, I've got a larger section of really just praise and song. You see how this is evolving? It begins with disaster, and in the middle of that, a tiny voice from the far ends of the earth saying, this is a good thing. Praise God for that. Until finally, I'm getting more and more praise as I get near the end of this section. The city of salvation, where perfect peace for those who trust. In that day, notice that phrase, this song, he says, sing this song, we will sing this. We have a strong city. He sets up walls and ramparts for salvation. The steadfast of mind you will keep in perfect peace because he trusts in you. In Yahweh himself. We have an everlasting rock. Starting with verse 5. The exalted city is brought low to dust. He's laid low those who settle on high. The exalted city. And you can't help but think of Babylon, which from the beginning, even as far back as Genesis, was a symbol of pride, right? Reaching up to heaven, making a name for themselves with their earthly accomplishments, right? You can't help but think of Babylon as kind of the archetype for the exalted city throughout all of the Bible. He brings it low. He brings it low to the ground. He casts it to the dust. The foot will trample it. The feet of the afflicted. The steps of the poor. Bring that picture that Winston had of the dusty ruins of ancient Babylon to your mind. O upright one, make the path of the righteous level. Though the wicked is shown favor, he doesn't learn righteousness. The idea there seems to be even people, there is a way, and that way will be made level, easy to travel. But there are some people you can bless them or you can whack them upside of the head, and neither way will they find that way of righteousness. That kind of seems like the idea in this text. They don't learn from either. There's a futility of self-made salvation. What beautiful images here. Oh, Yahweh our God, our other masters besides us have ruled us. Is that a good thing? Other masters have ruled us besides you? How's that going to turn out? And here you have to think about Pekah. When it was Pekah, it was Ahaz. What's he do? Oh, we better call on Assyria, right? And later we're going to see somebody calls Egypt up. Hey, can you come give the other man? We're trying to find help. Are we ever going to save ourselves in this situation? Winston, thank you for your time. I'm just saying what he said. All these earthly solutions, we're going to fail. And that's what we're saying here. Yahweh, our other masters beside you rule. The dead will not rise. The departed spirits will not rise. You've destroyed them. We gave birth. There's a long description of the travail, the pains of childbirth, right? And he says, well, we finally did give birth as it seems, but what? Only to win. Nothing. All that effort, and what came out? I was hoping for a child. Nothing. Disappointment. Emptiness. We could not accomplish salvation. You get the point of that? We can't do it ourselves. All these solutions we think we're going to find. You're dead, not the others. Your dead will live. Their corpses will rise. Again, you hear shadows of maybe future things, but still in the same poem. And then cover my people. And this is the sense of existing in a time of judgment. Hide for a little while until the indignation passes by. That's what I want sometimes. I know it's going to get rough. Things are not going to be pleasant for anybody. Probably us as well. But you know, there is a place where we can hide. Put me in that place when you come through, God, and do what you're going to do. I'll praise you, no matter whether I like it or not, whether I understand it or not. But hide me. Hide me till your indignation passes. For behold, Yahweh is about to come out of from his place in the earth and visit the iniquity of the inhabitants. Finally, chapter 27 is the restored vineyard. Leviathan is punished and killed. Leviathan probably here a symbol of chaos, of the power of wickedness that needs to be tamed. He shows up again in Job, I think, and it seemed like maybe in one of the Psalms or two. Maybe a mythological creature, I don't know, but the message is not hard to understand. Maybe some people would have perceived him as the most powerful, scary, dominant creature that no man can tame, but what does God do? Takes him out. Easy. I think that's the idea. In that day, again, Yahweh will punish Leviathan, the fleeing serpent, with his fierce and great and mighty sword. Even Leviathan, the twisted serpent, he will kill the dragon who lives in the sea. You probably recognize that language, too, from another book way later in the Bible of this whole picture of God's judgment stretching to the end of time. And then listen to this. Before we read this, remember the vineyard. I think Caleb described it very well last night. God planted it. He had great hopes. He was looking for fruit. It was going to be beautiful. He put his effort into it. And what happened? Nothing. It was ruined. No fruit. Nothing. Listen to this vineyard. As the Lord struck, as he has struck down, I didn't read it. In that day, a vineyard of delight. Sing of it. Sing of it. Here's a command to sing. This isn't a song of praise. It's saying you better sing about this. Yahweh am his keeper. I water it every moment, lest anyone damage it. I keep it night and day. Israel will blossom in bud, and they will fill the whole earth with produce. You remember chapter 7. No produce, nothing. Great disappointment. Here, fruit. Verse 12. In that day, again, Yahweh will start his threshing from the flowing stream of the river, right, Euphrates, to the brook of Egypt. You will be gathered up one by one, O sons of Israel. In that day, a great trumpet. Are there other trumpets in the Bible mentioned related to God's judgment and coming? A great trumpet will be blown. Those who were perishing and who were banished will come and worship Yahweh where? On his holy mountain. In his holy mountain. Boy, you can almost fast forward to the book of Revelation with this language. But I'm resisting, this is a parenthesis, I'm resisting saying this is all about the second coming of Christ. Yes, it is. But it is also about all the other judgments that God has made through time. It reminds me of the language in Zephaniah, this idea of people coming from all faraway places. In fact, we heard a talk on Ethiopia yesterday. It seemed appropriate. For then I will change them to peoples with purified lips. Does that sound familiar? From Isaiah, whose lips had to be purified. That all of them may call on the name of Yahweh, to serve him shoulder to shoulder. From beyond the rivers of Ethiopia, my worshipers, my scattered ones, will bring my offerings, which I think might be other people. I'm not sure. But in that text, go look at it. The offerings there might be the converts that have been made. I will cause to remain in your midst a lowly and poor people. That's who comes. Is it the priest or the lay people? Yes. Some. Is it the debtor or the creditor? Yes. Some. You see, it's the lowly and poor. And they will take refuge, poor in spirit, and they will take refuge in the name of Yahweh. At that time I'll bring you in, even at the time when I gather you together. Indeed, I will give you to be a name and praise among all the peoples of the earth. For I will restore your fortunes before your eyes, says Yahweh. This is Zephaniah, which is a good bit later, close to the end of the time of Jude. Okay, I'm going to kind of go quickly here, but I hope you've gotten the sense of what I've been trying to say with these texts from Isaiah. Here's the city of man in these chapters. The title says 24 through 25, but it's all 4 chapters, 27 included. The city of chaos, right? Desolation. You made the city into a heap, right? The walls have been brought down. He's laid low those who settle on high. The fortified city is now isolated. Why? There's no protection. On the other hand, Yahweh of hosts will reign on Mount Zion. He is a strong defense for the poor, a refuge, a shade. He'll prepare a lavish banquet there. He'll rest on his mountain. We have a strong city. You see the difference in the language here. And I just circled some things. Yes, the city of man claimed to be fortified and a palace and unassailable and on high and protected, but none of those things last. You see the contrast there. And on the other hand, on God's side, a strong defense and so on for the enemy. So there, you see the contrast that you can sweep through a different way and look at that. And I have to think of Babylon. And I'm going back to 13, although I don't need to spend much time because Winston made a good point. Babylon who? You know, well, who are they at this time? Right? And yet there's a lot of attention paid to them. Perhaps as an icon for the city of pride, Babylon isn't mentioned in 24 through 27, but when you keep hearing this language about the city and all of that, especially from this side of the events, it just seems to be clearly about that. And so chapter 13 has more significance. I'll just say, here's the taunt toward Babylon as they're destroyed. I just want to bring this up. There he says, you see down there I hope my mouse maybe will, well, I can't do it. Anyway, verse 13 there, he says, you said in your heart, I will ascend to heaven. I'll raise my throne. I will sit on the mount of the assembly in the recesses of the north. I will ascend to the heights of the clouds. I will make myself like the Most High. With regard to Babylon, does that sound familiar? What did they actually say they were doing there in Genesis? We're going to build a tower to heaven, and, we're going to make a name for us. The very language he's bringing forward from way back at the beginning of time, just after the flood, to here in this time, and Babylon shows up again before we're done with the Bible. Okay, so Babylon's mentioned. I'm going to skip over this. There are things to be said, but I want to make sure we get to the history. So when I look at these chapters, I see these kind of summary prophecies. There's a final judgment of the wicked, and there's a reign of God. There's a feast on Mount Zion. There's salvation and resurrection, which suggests even if I had the worst thing happen to me during this time of God's judgment, no problem. I'm good. Restoration and gathering of God's people. Evil's defeated. A fruitful vineyard. A great trumpet blows, announcing the victory, I think. As we will see we already did see in chapter 61. So here's a chart. If you want to order the charts by emailing me, you can do that. I'm not sure this is I'm sure it is not in the manuscript. But here's where you can take these Isaiah references and push them forward into the New Testament. The New Testament writers are thinking about the way God acts in these various passages and quoting Isaiah, or at least using the very same context. Okay, let's do some history now. There are 5 kind of segments of this historical section. I'm not going to be quite as tedious. I'm just going to try to tell the story. It'll be from memory, so if I get something wrong, just raise your hand and say, that's not right. That'd be fine. Be helpful. All right, Hezekiah had a crisis, and that is that Rabshakeh, who was a representative of Sennacherib, right? See, y'all help me with this. Comes to say, you're in trouble. Why don't you just give up now? It'd be best for you. Just give up now, right? Even though you think Yahweh protects you and all of that. By the way, I would just say about Hezekiah, and I wanted to just read this summary. Hezekiah did that which was right in the eyes of Jehovah according to all that David his father had done. He removed the high places, a bunch of lists of things, including the brazen serpent got removed. That was kind of interesting. But anyway, he trusted in Yahweh, the God of Israel, so that after him was none like him among all the kings of Judah, nor among them that were before him. What do you think of Hezekiah? That's a summary. You know how you get the summary of the kings when you first see them mentioned? Well, that's his summary. I'm impressed with this guy. Well, let's look at the story. I'll be more impressed. So, Rabshakeh meets Hezekiah's officers by the conduit of the upper pool on the highway of the fuller's field. Now, that's a strange thing to tell me exactly which, paving stone they're standing on. I mean, I'm exaggerating, right? But that location has appeared already in Isaiah, almost in the same language. And here it is. And Winston gave us the story, right? Isaiah and his son, with a fun name, whatever it is, Shear Jashub or something, meets Isaiah. Where? Notice in the red. At the conduit of the upper pool to the highway of the fuller's field. What? What is going on here? Well, that's Ahaz, not Hezekiah. And what's happening is Ahaz, as Winston very well said, his heart, he got shook, right? And he's frightened to death. And so Isaiah meets him. He said, hey, it's going to be okay. In fact, I know you're frightened. If you need a sign, I'll give you a sign. God says you ask anything you want to. Remember that when we come back to Hezekiah about asking for a sign. Well, the same place, they come back and they meet. Well, what was Ahaz's response? I need help. And he calls to Assyria for help. Bad move. It cost him the silver of the temple right there, but it was just a bad move, right? Go back to Hezekiah. Okay, we're fast forward back to Hezekiah now. Years later, they meet there with the scribe. It's not Isaiah this time. It's just the representatives, but this guy from Assyria, this scary guy's there. And he just threatens them. He says, don't trust Egypt. And that quote about leaning on a rod, if you lean on this staff, it's going to pierce your hand. That's not Isaiah language. That's what Rabshakeh says, which is probably true, right? It is true, but these are his language, right? Don't trust Egypt. And so he's yelling, and all the people on the wall are listening in, and the officers say, hey, could you stop speaking in Hebrew? Look, we can understand you if you speak in Aramaic. He said, no, I'm not going to stop speaking in Hebrew, right? Because you guys need to hear this. And so he continues to make even harsher threats. So all the people on the wall will be frightened by that. And here's his deal. Listen, you guys surrender right now. I assume that means, turn in your arms, start paying me money, whatever. And everything will be fine. We'll leave you alone for a while. You can have a good time, stay in your home until the day we come back and deport you and take you to another place. But that's going to be great too. You'll love it there, right? The men didn't say anything. Hezekiah told them to keep quiet. They go back to Hezekiah. Hezekiah mourns. I don't think he was shook, but he was sad. He was actually, and as we talked with Mark yesterday, this makes you turn and say, I don't have any solution for this. There's only one other place to turn. That's what Hezekiah did. And so he actually quotes various passages in his prayer from God's promises that take care of his people. Imagine quoting scripture to God. Isaiah answers back when he sends for Isaiah. He says, don't be afraid. This guy's going to hear a report. He's going to return to his land and all of that. So Rabshakeh actually was distracted. He kind of went away, but he came back with another thread. It was a follow-up message, which said, listen, none of the other gods have stopped us. I don't know why you listen to Hezekiah and thinks that Yahweh is any different from these other gods. And he has a letter. And he takes the letter and he goes into the temple and presents it before Yahweh. Here's my problem. I picture that all the time. Something difficult and I have no clue how to solve it. I just want to write it on a piece of paper and I don't know where to go exactly except in prayer just to say, read this. And maybe I don't even know how to pray as I ought. It's maybe part of the idea. Let God look at what I'm trying to say and make sense of it and help me. Okay, so here's his prayer. Yahweh of hosts, the God of Israel, who's enthroned above the cherubim. You see how he sees a world that we don't see? You're God. You alone of all the kingdoms have made heaven and earth, creation language. You incline your ear. Open your eyes. See, listen to all the words of Sennacherib, who has sent them to reproach the living God. Truly, Yahweh, the kings of Assyria have laid waste all the countries in their lands and have cast their gods into the fire, for they were not gods, but the work of men's hands. It just illustrates the uselessness of those idols. Sorry, I didn't read that part. But so they have destroyed. But now, Yahweh, save us from his hand, that all the kingdoms of the earth may know that you are Yahweh, you alone. All right, so the answer back from Isaiah is a prophecy. And I don't quite understand how prophets work, but Isaiah can speak conversationally, But sometimes he goes into the prophet mode. You know what I mean? And it's all in couplets, and it's all exaggerated hyperbole language. You know what I mean? Well, he slips into that mode here, which is cool. Whom have you reproached? And so I'm not going to read all this, but anyway, the summary is Assyria boasted of great works. Yahweh says, I'm going to tame you and turn you back. I like this language. He says, you know, you raged against me, and you were presumptuous. You thought it was your doing. No, I was arranging all this. I was the one enabling you to do those conquerings that you did, including the northern kingdom. And you forgot that. Therefore, I'll put a hook in your nose, a bridle on your lips, and I will turn you back by the way you came. Take him right back. So, Yahweh strikes 185,000 Assyrians before they can even make a move against Jerusalem. That wasn't hard. I didn't expect that. But that's what happened. Now, fast forward, actually maybe fast backward a little bit. Hezekiah has this incident where he's told that he's going to die. You remember that story. So he wept, he turns correctly to Yahweh. And here he says, I'm going to give you a sign that you're going to live 15 more years. You see this actually a contrast with Ahaz. Now in chapter 7, I didn't mention this, but the sign that he got, whether he wanted it or not, was that a virgin would conceive and bear a son, which suggested a time frame for how long it would be before things happen. So Caleb's looking at his watch. I'm doing my best here. So
I don't have a watch.
Oh, sorry. So I'm trying to go fast, but you know, we don't even need to cover the last slide, so we're done with that. Anyway, so he gets 15 more years. The sundial goes backward. I would like to have seen that one. I wonder if the earth would like stop and then everybody be thrown, but I guess not. God took care of that. But anyway, but Hezekiah starts using language that I'm recognizing from David about Sheol and not being left in the pit, and you know what I mean? I'm quoting some things here. You know, Hezekiah was an author of some Proverbs and Psalms, I think. Y'all know what I mean? He knew how to do this. And this was his way of praising God, was to construct something like this song here. You brought me back from the pit of nothingness. You've cast my sins behind me. Sheol cannot thank you. Death cannot praise you. That is, if I'm there, I'm not. Those who go down to the pit cannot watch. But as is the living this day, it is the living who give thanks to you, and that's what he wants to do. Of course, I've put some psalms in here that these things remind you of. In this one in particular, you may recognize this psalm, but almost this language is used throughout those. I'll bless Yahweh, who's counseled me. I dwell securely. You will not forsake my soul to Sheol, nor will you will not give your Holy One to see corruption. You will make known to me the path. Do we know this psalm? It's a psalm of David. It was already there in Hezekiah's time. Who quotes this a lot? Is the New Testament preachers. Because it has to do with conquering death, right? That gets rid of death as the giant curse of all mankind. Hezekiah didn't quote quite word for word, but he sure did borrow a lot of language from Psalm 16. Okay, before I show the last little incident here, I'll say this. I'm kind of feeling good about Hezekiah. How about you? In fact, this psalm, which seems like it might be messianic, especially now we look back at it, Hezekiah quotes that he was almost resurrected from the dead. You know what I mean? And it says there was no king better than him before or after. Do you see that? And was he of the tribe of David? Was he a son of David? And did he conquer these Assyrians with kind of an almost magical power? I mean, he didn't, of course, but he has access to Yahweh who did that. What are you thinking? Are you thinking what I'm thinking? What are you thinking? What do you think I'm thinking? Are you thinking what I'm thinking?
I don't know.
Well, I have another equation. No. A type for sure, but put yourself back in those days, right? These world powers, and he's conquering them. I mean, you know what I mean? God. What do you think it means? Maybe. Maybe he's the Messiah. You know, God saved him from death. He's obviously follows God in everything he did. I don't know. I'm making all this up just to be dramatic, I guess. But Isaiah tells us one more story. It's not a good one. Maybe the point is, hey, sorry, not this guy. I don't know. Here's the story. He was so thrilled. In fact, he got better, and the Babylonians, whoever they are, they heard that he was doing better, and they sent some congratulations to him. And he invited him in and showed him everything in the temple. And I don't know what he was thinking. It sounds to me like he was getting too proud, and he was making alliances with people who might be impressed with what he had accomplished, and what he collected, and what he had done for Yahweh, and all that. And he brings them in, and Isaiah says, "What did you show them?" And he says, "I showed them everything." And what's the prophecy? It's all going to go to them. They're going to come get it all. And not only that, your sons. And they're going to take them off. And they're going to be in captivity. What a terrible thing that is. But I have to say, if I can find the chart about that there's a message in that. I think I skipped over it. I'd have to go back and find it. But there's a sense in which Isaiah says in this text that actually that will purify Israel. He says it. I should have made better notes to go back and find the verse. Your sons will go into captivity, sure enough, but there'll be a purification. I think he calls it an atonement for Jacob, is the way he phrases it, right? For Israel. And what did happen as a result of captivity? He said idolatry. In fact, it even says the Asherah will be ground to dust. It did finally conquer idolatry. And I'm still thinking about Habakkuk. You're going to do what? Bring the who against us? Right? Well, no. There's a good purpose. It's going to be hard. And the just will survive by trusting God.
Amen.
All right, so let's go to the end. That should be 66. I got excited when I saw 66 one because I read it as 61 one. I thought, oh yes, I want to cover that. But it's not 66. Sorry for the typo. Heaven is my throne. The earth is the footstool of my feet. Where is a house you could build for me, and a place that I may rest? For my hand made all these things. Thus all these things came into being, declares Yahweh. But to this one I will look, to him who is humble and contrite of heart. There's a lot of stories about God dwelling somewhere. Where is he going to fit, right? And here's a few. He made all things. Of course, that's a reference to the creation of time. And then at some point, God said to the Israelites, I'm going to choose a place where I will dwell, or where my name will dwell. That turned out to be the tabernacle. To David, he said, I've been going about in a tent from Egypt till now. Why do you think I need a big old house to live in, right? Solomon built the temple, but said this, but God, would he really, truly dwell on earth, right? He built it all, right? Much less his throne. And then in Jeremiah 7, remember there was this false dependence on this symbol of God's presence, where they could shout, the temple of God, we're safe, we're safe. What about God's house? Jesus finally said, it's not on that mountain or this mountain that the true worshipers. Now it is on a mountain, but it's not one we see yet. Stephen quotes Isaiah, this very passage, and he says, the Most High does not dwell in houses made with human hands. Right? Heaven is my throne, and earth is the footstool of my feet. That's Isaiah. That's what we just read from Isaiah 66, not 61. Why did Stephen quote that? Well, the answer is, he was defending himself against the charge that he wanted to destroy the temple. That's what they charged him with, right, in that synagogue setting. Why did they charge him with that? Well, because that was the charge against Jesus. He said he destroyed the temple. Well, why did they charge him with that? Because early in his ministry, he cleansed the temple and said, destroy this temple in 3 days. You see what I mean? This whole story about the temple of God kind of pervades Jesus' ministry, his death, his accusation, Stephen's death as a martyr after that. And guess who comes along later in the book of Acts and uses that same language, which I think he heard from Stephen.
Yes.
Right? God speaking to the pagan, Paul speaking to the pagan says, the God who made the world and all things in it does not dwell in temples made with hands. Okay, we kind of figured out where he doesn't dwell. Who does he dwell with? And this second verse answers that question. To him who is humble and contrite of heart. I dwell on a high and holy place, and also with the crushed and lowly of spirit. You see that in my application slide, which I'm not going to show because you've already seen it. That's the crowd I want to be in. That's the crowd I need to be in. No matter what God is doing, I'm praising Him for it. And I'm looking forward to that city that's fortified and so on. And I'll finish with this. And this looks forward to the very eve of the Babylonian attack, destruction of the temple, carrying off into captivity, which we think is terrible, but in God's way of thinking, it's just one of His many acts of mercy, right? Habakkuk says this. And I think it's the only place I could find where it says someone trembled at the word of God. You see that in the previous verse? With the crushed and lowly, where is it? Up there. And who tremble at my word. That's the previous verse. Well, I need to go back to the verse you see. Right here. This one I will. Crushed and lowly of spirit. I'm having trouble finding it. And who trembles at my word. Yeah, that's the second part of that verse. Well, who else said that? Well, Habakkuk said it right on the eve of the judgment. I heard my inward parts tremble. The sound of my lips tingled. Decay enters my bones, and in my place I tremble, because I must wait quietly for the day of distress and for the people to arise who invade us. Babylonians are coming. I think we're on the eve of something like that. I don't know what it is. God knows. He has a plan. Can we wait and tremble at His word and trust in His promises? And then the chart that you don't need to see because you saw it before. All right. Thank you. Sorry.
Amen.